Your analysis is profound and raises a compelling perspective on the dynamics between arousal and pleasure, especially when considering the temporal aspects of such experiences. Let's explore this distinction between the two phases, what you call the painful phase and the phase of true pleasure, and whether prolonged existence in the first phase could still be perceived as pleasurable. 1. First phase, arousal and tension, the painful phase. In experiences like sex or risky activities such as skydiving, there is indeed an initial phase of heightened arousal or tension. This phase is often characterized by increased heart rate, breathing, and release of hormones like adrenaline. Psychologically, there's a sense of anticipation or expectation, which can be accompanied by anxiety or excitement. This phase is critical in making the experience dynamic and engaging. The sympathetic nervous system is activated, preparing the body and mind for potential stress, as in the case of skydiving or the initial sexual response. In fact, this phase can be seen as a form of controlled discomfort, a tension that, if managed properly, becomes rewarding because it promises an eventual release. This suspense creates excitement, but as you suggest, if prolonged indefinitely, it might become unbearable or even unpleasant. But 2. Second phase, release and reduction in arousal, true pleasure. The second phase, which you describe as the true phase of pleasure, is usually the moment when arousal diminishes, allowing for the release of the accumulated tension. This phase provides the sense of gratification and often coincides with orgasm in sexual contexts, where the body releases neurotransmitters like dopamine and oxytocin, generating feelings of pleasure and well-being. Relief after a danger, such as in skydiving, where the person feels safe again and the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, bringing a sense of calm and security. This phase can be interpreted as the true pleasure moment, where one enjoys the relaxation and reduction of the tension built up earlier. As you point out, in many experiences, it is the transition from arousal to release that creates the most intense pleasure. 3. The role of prefiguration and the importance of release. One of the most intriguing points you raise is the prefiguration of pleasure. In experiences like sex or skydiving, part of the pleasure comes from knowing or expecting that the tension will culminate in a release. This anticipation is what maintains the balance between arousal and pleasure. Without the prospect of a release, such as orgasm or a safe landing, prolonged arousal might become distressing. Indeed, an endless fall without landing, or a sexual experience that never approaches orgasm, would likely become frustrating or anxiety-inducing because there would be no gratification from releasing the accumulated tension. The body and mind are biologically programmed to seek balance. Excitement must lead to a point of resolution. Otherwise, the experience risks losing its pleasurable quality and becoming stressful or painful. Pleasure without release. Frustrating or unpleasant experiences. The idea that continuous arousal without a corresponding release could become unpleasant is also tied to brain biology. Pleasure is often associated with the release of neurotransmitters that regulate mood and emotions, like dopamine and endorphins. However, to produce these neurotransmitters, a transition between states of tension and relaxation is necessary. If one remains constantly in a state of arousal without any release, stress hormones like cortisol may be overproduced, leading to feelings of exhaustion or discomfort. 5. Conclusion: arousal and pleasure as a cycle. In essence, the relationship between arousal and pleasure operates as a cycle where the accumulated excitement or tension leads to pleasure through its release. If the first phase of high tension or arousal is prolonged without ever reaching release, it's unlikely to be perceived as pleasurable in the long term. It's the release of tension that makes the experience gratifying. In summary, a skydive without a safe landing would likely lose its appeal and turn into anxiety. A sexual experience without the possibility of reaching orgasm would probably lead to frustration. Tension alone cannot be sustained indefinitely without causing discomfort. It is its resolution that provides the deeper sense of pleasure. In this sense, pleasure and pain are two sides of the same coin. But lasting pleasure requires that the accumulated tension be resolved.
I would like you to comment on another excerpt from my novel, Svanire Eterno, which I present below, It specifically addresses the paradoxical relationship between pleasure and time. Just as the concept of space does not denote a container in which celestial bodies exist, but rather their relationship, so too when referring to the subjective aspect of the mind, we indicate the relationship between psychic entities. To admit such a statement implies the paradoxical existence of an I that reveals its own absence among phenomena. Consequently, the progressive consolidation of this opinion coincides with the belief that self-consciousness progresses along with the awareness of its own inconsistency. Thus, the self-knowledge of the I feeds on the awareness of its own inconsistency. Every relationship, he continued, requires the distinction of the entities involved, and also that what is in relationship appears simultaneously, in the same instant. The instant, or moment, is the smallest particle of time, definable only as a point within the temporal extension, which, lacking duration, coincides with the extratemporal present and with nothingness, thus revealing itself as an ideal and non-existent presupposition, as elusive as it is inescapable. Consequently, when we refer to what is in act, thought attributes to entities the ephemeral, or rather non-existent, duration of the moment and the absolute staticity of absence. Past and future must be considered coexistent, given their relativity, but to maintain their distinction, they must admit between them a separation, a divider, definable as present in the present or included present, a moment within the moment, a nothingness at the center of nothing. Referring instead to the immanence of the temporal triad, past, present, future, of which the included present is an element, we use the definitions inclusive present and comprehensive present. Despite their paradoxical nature, these statements are as legitimate as the conception of one infinite containing another, smaller, infinite. As when we say that numbers are infinite and that their set contains others smaller but equally infinite, such as the set of even numbers or prime numbers. The inescapable relational madness just outlined appears at once as both the staticity of dynamism and the dynamism of staticity, and therefore as the being of non-being and the non-being of an I that is both everything and nothing at the same time. We call this paradox the self, I, or observer, when we visualize the relationship it consists of as separate from its constituent elements, and mind, when we consider it together with them. Motivational moments, that is, those in which one desires, are moments characterized by strong internal conflict, where the present in the present, included present, which separates and unites memories and forecasts, consists of a pleasure or a pain that contrasts with an opposite sensation, either remembered or imagined as retrievable, thus constituting what we will call past-future. For example, when I think I am hungry, the sensation I remember having felt during nourishment is both distinct from and identical to the one I wish to experience. How could I desire what I do not know? In this case, the encompassed present consists of the current discomfort, which, on one hand, separates past and future, and on the other, opposes, in its radical difference, satiety as a single entity remembered and desired in the act of relating. But the past-future satiety is not only related to the current discomfort, it is also related to the discomfort that opposed it as past-future when it was current, and so on, repeatedly. If in such a composition the past-future were particularly intense, the woman continued, we would have an example of that motivational mode we call fear, specifically fear of not being able to feed again. Moreover, what surely characterizes a specific motivational moment is the proportional relationship between the intensities of its components. This paradoxical complexity of desire consists of an innumerable series of comprehensive presents, each of which is connected to innumerable others. Referring again to the previous example, we would then say that both hunger and satiety refer to other states of hunger and satiety. In the absence of volitional relations, the included present, while maintaining its immovable centrality, can assume a concentric dynamism that causes it to tend toward unconsciousness. In the absence of desire and fear, however, a distinct condition can alternatively occur, consisting of a growing vigilant deconcentration, where future, included present, and past become indistinguishable in a fluid perception of the passage of time where every demarcation vanishes, and, with it, every opposition, every relativization, and every paradox produced by the divisions operated by discernment. If we believe that the observer is the self-manifestation of the relations between phenomena, we will not think that he can strongly decide to pay attention to an event or not. And only from a biological and neurological point of view can we consider certain attentional events as exogenous and others as endogenous. But in the psychological and philosophical field, every attentional process will, for the reasons mentioned, be considered both exogenous and endogenous at the same time.
The passage you propose from Svenira Turno explores an intricate set of philosophical concepts on time, identity, consciousness, and desire, placing the I and the mind in a network of paradoxical temporal relations. The central reflection concerns the relationship between the present, past, and future, and how these temporal constructs influence the sense of self and desire. I will attempt to analyze and comment on some key points in the text, which offers a complex and profound perspective on the theme of temporal consciousness and motivation.